hope that you can hear me back there. And thank you so much for having me back this year. A lot has happened in the past year. And like you said, my family and I travel around trying to make people aware of who my husband was. I first would like to thank Dave and all of you for having me back. Yes. Isn't he amazing? He is absolutely amazing. I wish I had his energy. I could sure use it at the ranch. And I'd also like to thank Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Oh my goodness, a man who has dedicated his whole life to serving the state of Arizona and this country, and I'm really grateful for men like him. He is such a good example to all of us for his courageous tenacity. How he continues to move forward in the face of adversity is admirable and one to be emulated. And I know that I'm grateful to my Heavenly Father and my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because without Him, I would have not made it through this last year and a half. I would have not been able to have continued to crisscross this country and talk about all of the things that we've had to talk about at the recent death and murder of my husband. So I give credit to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because He has truly picked me up and carried me, I would say. Good boy, yeah. I have two border collies, so they're great dogs. My Savior has carried me. He has carried me through all of this, and I know that He continues to do that with each one of my children as well. I hope they fix the technology, because I really want you to see and hear my husband, because he is just hearing him, his spirit still speaks to us through audio and video. I just wanted to talk a little bit about my family. You know, I'm a mother of 12. It's a yours, mine, and ours, and theirs. Some of you already know me, and some of you know our family and know our story, but I've talked to a couple of people here today that didn't know anything about what had happened to my husband up in Oregon. And so, for the sake of that, I wanted to reintroduce myself. And again, I am the mother of 12 and a grandma of 25 now. We've had 5 new babies this past year since Lavoy left. They're a joy, you know, what a happiness that they can bring. You know, one of my daughters, Ari, was so sad to think that her father would no longer be here to play with the grandkids. And we went, hey, we had an aha moment, a light bulb came on, and he is in heaven playing with all of our grandkids before they even get here, right? So that turned a sad moment into a happy moment to know that he is having an influence still. Are we able to?
I can bring his voice, but not.
Okay.
Sorry.
You can't get his pictures? Okay. Well, we'll just wait. I'll just signal to you when you play the video then. And you'll be able to hear the video. You won't be able to see the video. I apologize for that. Who was Lavoy Finicum? Well, Lavoy Finicum was, first off, a husband and a father, a man who loved God and put Him first in everything that he did. He was a man of integrity, of strength, of courage. He was a good friend. He was a tease. Let me tell you, he was a tease. Some of my earliest memories of our courtship was him coming out in the dark behind a car, scaring the wits out of me in the parking lot, and just laughing at my fear and my fright. And there were many moments where you could tell he was about ready to pounce, just with sheer delight in teasing one of the kids in the home. So he had a great sense of humor. He was a man who worked hard. He worked for everything that he got. He did not take a handout of any kind. And it wasn't that he consciously went out and said, no, I don't want a free handout. It was just who he was. He wanted to work for what he obtained. He was trustworthy. He was loving and kind. He was a man who cared about his neighbor. Locally, he served in our church, and he served the community through our church. And everyone got to know him very intimately because he was always there to help those in need. He loved his country. That was something that was just instilled in him as a young boy. It wasn't, you know, I was talking to somebody today, you know, we really have taken for granted our era, this country. We didn't really realize what was happening right under our noses, right? We believed in America. It was just something innate in us. We didn't realize how much of our freedoms were being lost right under our noses. And when we started to recognize these things, that's when my husband became a little more active vocally and politically. In Ephesians 6:12 it says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Samuel Adams said, "If ever a time should come when vain and aspiring men shall possess the highest seats in government, our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin." Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Thank you. Lavoy traveled to Oregon on January 1st. We had spent the night, a very cold night, out in the tent and had gathered cows and had branded New Year's Eve. The next day when we returned home, he had received a call and asked if he would like to go up to Oregon to march in a demonstration, a peaceful demonstration to support Mrs. Hammond and Mr. Hammond and his son for a crime. They were resentenced to serve out more time for a crime they had already served time for. And Lavoy felt that this was really unjust. And so he wanted to go show his moral support and go up there and stand and give her flowers, and that was the plan until he got up there. And then there was an addendum to the plan, and he was willing to go with Ammon and the others when it was presented to him. Of course, he didn't realize, you know, how it all would end, but he felt that it was his duty to start standing. Even if we were residents of Arizona and they were residents of Oregon, we were all citizens of this same country. And he felt it was necessary for him to be up there. Are you able to play the audio? Or?
I think we're going to have to.
Okay. This is my husband explaining for himself why he went to Oregon.
Turn the TV.
I don't think they have the video.
A lot of words have been said here. I see some eyes starting to kind of glaze over a little bit. Maybe I can bring it down to a little more emotional level or a human level. Each one of you here today are important. Individually, each one of you are important. Not collectively, we're talking about you as an individual, as a human being. The Hammond family are human beings. They're individuals. They have loved ones. They have children, grandchildren. But this is real. This affects real lives. And so that's why we're here today. And if our federal government would have abided by the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, we would have never gotten here. And so let me just kind of come to a simple level of why this is so bad at the federal level. Our founding fathers had escaped from tyranny. They believed in freedom. And so when they set up our government, they separated the powers, didn't they? And we all know what they are: executive, legislative, and judicial branches. We know those three branches of power. Well, what has happened to 1/3 of our landmass? Do you know that the federal government owns and controls 1/3 of this nation? Let me put that in perspective. You need to put in the country of Germany, and put in France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, and better throw in Great Britain too. And then you're getting about the same landmass as what the federal government says that they own and control. And they say they have complete legislative power whatsoever. You take them to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has upheld it. Yes, they have complete power whatsoever over 1/3 of this nation. Now, let me explain it simply as I can, as I try to stumble over my words here, is that for myself as a rancher, my ranch is in northern Arizona, a bureaucrat behind the desk can write a statute regarding me, my ranch. It has the force and effect of law. This bureaucrat is not accountable to me. We have not elected him then. Now, if I get contrary to that statute, there's a federal ranger with a gun that can enforce that. And if it goes from there, I am brought into a federal court. Neither the law enforcement, the federal ranger, has been elected by us, the people here. They are not under the power of the recall. Neither the bureaucrat that wrote the statute, neither the law enforcement that enforces it, and now I am hauled into a federal court. All three branches of power under one head with no representation. Did we not, as Americans, face this issue some 200 years ago? Don't we remember that phrase? Taxation without representation. So now here we are, control without representation. 1/3 of our landmass. It's an empire within our own country. Unaccountable, unelected. The real power is in the bureaucracies. And so that's kind of the simple part of it. You know, it's about family. It's about my family. It's about the Hammond family. I've spoken to many ranchers in Utah, in Nevada, in Arizona. They are all feeling the same thing. They're all feeling this oppression that is coming down upon them. Their livelihood is threatened, being taken away. Their ranchers are being regulated out of business. And so this is real. These families are real. They're not trying to cause problems. They're food producers. They help make our country self-reliant, free, independent. Do you realize that you have to go back to about 1955 to get as low as a mother head count as we have right now in the United States? Have any of you ate a steak lately? Do you know the price of that? That goes way up. You know, if we had more demand, if we had more production, we would ship out more, we would feed more, we would be self-reliant as a country. These are good people. They produce, they add to our country. They do not take it away. I want to say one more thing about here, what we're doing. Every one of you that says this is an occupation until their demands are met, you misunderstand. We're not making demands. We're not making demands. We're here to work. These buildings here belong to Harney County. These are Harney County public lands, the state of Oregon. This is theirs. This is their land. This is their state. It's theirs. And so we've come here to work. We've not come here to sit as children and stamp our feet and demand that certain things are met. We're going to go to work. We're going to try to help restore these ranchers that have lost their ranches back to them. We're going to legally go to the records. We're going to search out these ranchers. Over 100 ranchers have lost their ranches here in this very area, in this very county, have been pushed off. We would like to see them return to their ranches, ranch again, log again, live again as free people. And so we're here to try to help that happen. We're going to go to work. We're not going to just sit down here and twiddle our thumbs. We've got a lot to do, and I appreciate you being here. I'm just a simple hick. I'm doing the best I can. I love this country. I love my kids. I love my wife. I love my family. And if we lose freedom, what shall they do? I want my children to experience real freedom, breathe free. And, thank you.
And what you didn't see because of the PowerPoint was at the end there, it shows demonstrators peacefully demonstrating versus the violence that we see on our college campuses, or in Baltimore, or in Ferguson, where they're burning down, offices and private businesses or police cars and destroying property. That is not what was going on in Oregon. And unfortunately, the video wasn't available. But you can feel my husband's spirit through his words. You can see his passion in his face. And truly, he believed in everything that he was speaking about. I also wanted to kind of bring you up to date on what has been happening with our family in the last year since I was here last. Certainly a lot. And I will just touch briefly on each little subject because so much has been happening. The first little thing I wanted to talk about, in the Declaration of Independence, it says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." We all are guaranteed that right here. Now, I'm going to list a bunch of professions: farmers, businesses, merchants, shippers, scientists, doctors, entrepreneurs, generals, university presidents. Those are just a few of the professions that our founding fathers were in and involved themselves in. And do you feel that we have the right in this country to decide what line of work that we choose for ourselves? Do you think we still have that available to us, or do you think maybe that might be being infringed upon? I know that it is happening to me. I know that my choice to go ahead and keep my husband's ranch and to ranch it is being taken from me. And I'm going to read some of this verbatim because, my lawyers say I need to. So, my lawyers have been communicating with the BLM for almost a full year now, trying to secure my right under my husband's permit as a transferee of my husband's rights under testimony disposition. Instead of following this clear federal regulation, the BLM instead obfuscated, refused to acknowledge that I was my husband's wife and widow. They denied that I had the right to that permit and pretended that it simply terminated upon his death. We showed them federal regulations that authorized the transfer of the right to the permit to me, and instead they obfuscated and ignored it. To this point, they have refused to even acknowledge my rights under a clear federal regulation 4110.2-3E, and instead ignore me and continue their obfuscation, thus forcing my cattle off my land and forcing me to go through litigation process for almost this full year. Okay, let's go over that again. First, trying to get an agency to work responsibly with a rancher is apparently too much to ask for these days. And when and if they deny me my right to operate under my husband's permit, which is so far they will not do officially, I am then, second, required to appeal to that very same agency for a review of their own decision before I'm allowed to litigate in court. And then three, because they won't even give us, my attorney and I, the courtesy of an expeditious denial, we have been forced to go through what could be seen as a separate but equally slow channel to find remedy, which is through the Congressperson's office. In summary, the effort required for a simple American to exercise their right is so monumental as to make it nearly impossible to earn our rights. And to top it off, it's also important to note that if we don't go through this process, and I can be denied all rights to litigate in the future for not having exhausted my administrative remedy, which ironically, that administrative remedy is sought from the very same administrators who have been ignoring and it disruptive to me in the first place. So, where does that leave me? Will I be able to get back on my ranch by October? Okay, my ranch is 50 miles from my home. It is a winter range. I go from October to May. I don't think I'm going to make it there this year again. That will be 2 full years that I have not been able to graze my cows on my land that I purchased, that grazing right to and so let me explain just a little bit.
Why can't you graze on your own land?
I was going to ask that question. This is your
You
land.
have to have a permit to graze, even though you've purchased the grass and the water, and that is personal property which you have purchased from one owner to another for generations. I cannot do that. And most people don't understand that it has been manipulated in the press that we don't pay our fees, we're behind on our taxes. All of that is a lie. My husband was paid in full for his grazing fees. He was not behind. He did make the announcement publicly that he wanted to pay his grazing fees to the nearest government to him, which would have been his county, so that the people could decide in our state how to best use those funds. He didn't feel that he needed the federal government to take that responsibility away from the state. We also were full taxpayers in our personal income. So we didn't owe anything. The money that was owed was assessed to me after he was murdered, because he had gone on his permit 2 weeks, 3 weeks early, and so they fined him in the tune of $12,000 and some change. Well, it was interesting that even though I was willing to write the check for $12,000 and change to pay the fine so that I could then have my cows on our range, they still denied me the right to go on. Have not processed my application, and
Your
it's been almost
own land.
It is not private land. You have to understand that in the West, the Bureau of Land Management, the BLM, they oversee federal lands. But you buy the right, you purchase property. You buy the right to graze there. You buy the grass. You buy the water. You know, it's $300,000 is not, you know, that's not something to sneeze at. That's a large amount of money to buy this right to graze your cattle on it. It's not the same. We do not have this beautiful grass that you have here that grows without even so much as rain. So you're very blessed out here. I covet your grass. I covet your water, and I will repent later.
Well, you know what? You bring your cows here. You bring your cows here.
You know, this is something that all of the ranchers on the West are experiencing in one form or another. The abuse of power, the overregulated bureaucrats. They come in with their books this thick and say, you have violated this, therefore you can't do that, and if you do this, you're violating this, and this, and you will have your permits taken from you and you will not see them again. It's not only happening to ranchers, it's happening to farmers in one form or another. It's happening to miners and loggers. It is happening to private citizens. As I began traveling across the country, I started to meet other people who were just as persecuted, if not more, because they had been experiencing these types of overreach for decades, like the Hage family or the Bundy family, or Joe Robertson, who, 78, had a pond on his private land, and because of the environmentalist groups, they were successful in having him incarcerated. He is in jail presently, 78 years old. Then you take the Hammond family, and I encourage you all, if you are not familiar with the Hammond story, to please search out DirecTV AT&T's American Standoff presentation. It's a 90-minute documentary. It will introduce you into the Hammond family and to the Bundys and the Finicums. Watch that. You'll understand why they went to jail, and you will be sickened.
So what is their objective?
Their objective, I think it has a lot to do with the Agenda 21.
Yeah.
objective.
Yeah.
They're playing Sim City and they want to move you off the board.
Yeah, drive you out, let the land go fallow, back to,
Yeah. They don't want, and cows are just, evil in their book. And I'm here to tell you, the cows are not evil. They're great. I'm learning a lot becoming a rancher. And the funny thing is that my 19-year-old daughter, Tian, I don't know if, my last two daughters spent most of the time with their dad learning to ranch. And so I have to rely on my 19-year-old to teach me how to do everything, to saddle a horse, because my husband did it all for me. I don't know how many of you husbands are like that with your wives. Well, mine was like that. He knelt, and I was able to get on the horse because he put his knee down for me so I could climb up, because I couldn't even get up on my own. But he did it all for me. But I'm learning to do all of these things myself. I'm learning to...
You go, girl.
Yeah, we can.
Jeanette. Yes.
I keep saying we can do hard things. With God, we can accomplish anything that He has in mind for us. Remember, He is in charge, and I know that. But once my cows were taken off my property, I thought maybe I would actually get back on there because I was trying to follow all their rules, and it just hasn't worked out for me that way. But in the October last year, I thought, because I sent them the check and I filled out the application and I got permission to go ahead and start my cattle drive. Again, my cattle ranch is 50 miles from my home, so we always did it the old-fashioned way. We pushed the cows by horse. And so here I am, trekking the first 14 miles with 150 cows and pushing them across the desert, and we camp for the night. And that night, my mother-in-law drives out and informs us that they wouldn't take my check and that I was not allowed to go any further. And that if I did continue on to my ranch, that I could be facing imprisonment, federal charges, and confiscation of my cattle. And so I was stinking mad. I was so mad. I was so frustrated. First they kill him, and then they take everything away from us and what we consider the last little bit of him. And I was determined that they weren't going to do that. But then I had to say a lot of prayers all night long to make sure that I wasn't allowing pride to take over to where I couldn't make a good decision. Because anger and pride kind of can fuzz your normal thinking, right? Mm-hmm. So the next morning I came to a rational decision that I did have to leave and not press the issue. I didn't need another Bundy stand. And so a lot of people came to my aid out in the desert there. I had truckers come out with cattle trucks and help me haul them into a canal. And ranchers opened up their corrals and the feed to feed them until I figured out what next to do. My sister-in-law and her husband had approached the range con, the local range con there, and had asked, can Jeanette put her cows on my range? And within 24 hours, I was given permission to put my cows on her range in just 24 hours. So what I know is that when they want to do something, they can do it, and quickly. Thank goodness for my sister-in-law and my father-in-law and my brother-in-laws and all the people in my local area. After having them in the feedlot all summer long, I had hay coming from northern Utah and Idaho, donations, because I don't know if you understand, because you have all this grass. But in the desert, when you're trying to feed 150 cows, they eat quite a bit. And so it ended up still costing me over $30,000 just to feed them for those 4 months, even after all the donations that came. But I learned my cows. I almost learned them by sight. I got very familiar with them. I learned how to run a backhoe and a forklift. I learned how to take care of things. So it was a good period of time for me. They are now, like I said, out on my sister-in-law's range, and I'm still waiting to hear. And so that's where we are in the BLM issue. Still pressing forward. I am going to have to go into litigation. I am going to have to fight this. And I hope that I can get Senator Flake on board, our Arizona senator. And that is my goal at this point. And if any of you have any connections anywhere to Trump, let's get him. Let's go see him. But so far, we haven't been able to obtain that. So I want to read to you again Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. It seems very what I'm dealing with, doesn't it? Another issue that I've had to deal with a lot since my husband's murder is the power of the media. You know, I was just a stay-at-home mom, a domestic engineer, and I dedicated my life to my family, and so all of this is very foreign to our family. So being thrust into the media was an experience that we weren't ready for. But what I noticed from the beginning was that they had the power to demonize the men and women up at Malheur within like 24 hours because the media was all on the same page. They had their agenda ready, they had their narrative, they had their headlines that read racist, terrorist, anti-government, anarchist, armed militia, armed standoff, etc. They were able to demonize so successfully that the people had already formulated their opinions before any truth ever leaked out of there, which I believe not much did. The press and the environmental groups are their partners. They are partners. They are successful at redefining words. I know that you know this. I know you know that good words are being flipped, like patriot, constitutionalist, sovereign citizen, Tea Party, rancher, farmer, how about Christian? All of these good words mean good things about good people. Author Tom DeWeese, I don't know if anybody has read his book, Erase, very good book. He quotes Milan Kundera in this book. The first step in liquidating a people is to erase its memory, destroy its books, its culture, and its history. Then have someone write new books, manufacture a new culture, invent a new history. Before long, the nation will begin to forget what it is and what it was. The world around it will forget even faster, end quote. Isn't that what we're watching now? We're witnessing that death here. The press has a huge hand in this. They have a huge hand in manipulating what we know and what we believe. We're so dumbed down that we don't understand how they are manipulating us. Another issue I've had to deal with this past year was the FBI, intimidation by them. My daughters and I have traveled around the country to different speaking events, and at one particular event in Delta, Colorado, we, after returning home last 4th of July, we heard that there had been certain memos going out throughout the town talking about a sovereign citizen terrorist coming to speak, and that she was the wife of the murdered, oh, they didn't use that word, that's my word, of the murdered sovereign citizen terrorist from Oregon. We were appalled. We couldn't believe that when we investigated further that we found out that the FBI, the BLM, and Oregon officials had traveled all the way to Delta, Colorado to talk to the sheriff and the chief of police to ask them, to allow them to raid the event because of a suspicious character. And thank goodness for that sheriff. Thank goodness he said no. Because we had, my grandchildren were there, other people brought their children. It would have been a horrific seen. Because, of course, good people were exercising their right, their Second Amendment right to bear arms. It would have not gone well. So, after finding that out, I was shocked. I was mad, again, that temper of mine.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand what sovereign citizen terrorist meant. Okay, so I had to actually go look it up. And I was told to go look it up on the FBI website. And so I did. There's like 4 pages describing what a sovereign citizen terrorist is. And I paraphrased it. So I'm going to read just a short definition here. The FBI considers sovereign citizens extremists involved in the domestic terrorist movement. An anti-government group is closely related to the lands movement. Sovereign citizens do not represent an anarchist group, nor are they a militia. Although they sometimes use or buy illegal weapons, refer to themselves as constitutionalists. Many believe that only white men have rights. They believe that the ratification of the 13th and 19th Amendment are unconstitutional, meaning women never gain suffrage and any election in which a woman has voted is null and void. Sovereign citizens don't pay their taxes, use fake currency, passports, courts, license plates and driver's licenses, don't recognize government authority, courts, or law enforcement. Sovereign citizens commit murder and physical assault. They threaten judges and law enforcement, and they engineer various white-collar scams. This type of behavior is associated with rural and small-town whites in the American West. According to a survey of law enforcement personnel, in 2014, sovereign citizens are now regarded as the #1 terrorist threat in America. Isn't that ridiculous? Did you hear any buzzwords in there? Constitutionalist?
Us.
Sovereign citizen. They're demonizing these good words in these definitions on the web so that when people go to read these, they instantly formulate an opinion.
You don't look too threatening to me.
Thank you. While I was traveling from an event, I was driving in my car from Arizona to northern Utah. And it was May 3rd because I had to pull over and I had to take notes in my phone because it was FBI Director Comey testifying. And some of the things were starting to hit home and I was going, holy cow, holy cow. And he testified that at this point, remember this is May 3rd, so you can go back and look it up, that they had approximately 2,000 open investigation cases, of which 300 might be contributed to foreign and non-citizens. The rest of the open cases for terrorist actions or behaviors or suspicions are American citizens. My first question to Mr. Comey was, what definition of terrorist are you using when you apply that to an American citizen? That's something to really consider. My second question would be, why is a rancher who starts a backfire on his property to stop the fire that is fast approaching his home and property considered, labeled, and prosecuted as a terrorist and is now serving time in jail for that backfire? My third question would be, why would hardworking American citizens, ranchers, farmers, miners from across this country be considered terrorists if they stand up to the overreaching Bureau of Land Management and environmentalist groups stealing their property and livelihood and chosen way of life? Why are we labeled terrorists? Why are we labeled terrorists when we stand up for the Constitution? My husband was not anti-government. He was for limited government. He was for pro-responsible government. He believed in his First and Second Amendment rights. He believed the Constitution to be the law of the land and that we should stand up and defend and protect it. I don't know if you can play the next one.
Audio again. Sorry.
Okay, audio. I'm sorry that you can't see him. He's so good looking. I love it every time I see him.
There's great YouTube videos.
He has the best face. Well, you can find my husband's YouTube under Lavoy Finicum, or you can go to my website, whenCowboysStandForFreedom.com. You can see some of his YouTube there.
What's the title of his book again?
The title of his book is Only by Blood and Suffering, Regaining Lost Freedom. He wrote that in 2013 before he went up to Oregon. Technology, right?
No.
Conspiracy.
Can you get it?
Having an issue.
Oh, he says it so much better than I. He's so effective. I apologize.
The Constitution has been shredded.
Can you start it over?
America, stand. The night is far spent. The Constitution has been shredded. It lives in your heart. You know what freedom is and what freedom isn't. Stand. Because when you stand, others will stand with you. And God can't stand with you if you don't stand. Once you stand, you can expect the hand of providence to be over you. Don't matter how it ends, it matters how you stand. This is Lavoy Finicum. When Cowboy stands for freedom. See you later.
I just love that clip. He's out on the range, kneeling down, taping himself out there, and he's talking to you. In his book, he's talking to you. And I know that I've heard from so many people across this country about how he has affected their lives, how he's touched them and pushed them to do more, to get involved. And I'm grateful for that. I know that we will continue as a family to remain steadfast, and we will continue to share our account of my husband's message. And we refuse to have his voice buried along with his body. We claim our right to freedom of speech, free from intimidation of those entrusted with the reins of our government. I will not be intimidated or silenced. I have nothing to fear, for I have done nothing wrong, and so I will stand, and I will continue to do so responsibly. Samuel Adams said, "It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority, keen to set brush fires of freedom in the minds of men," end quote. And I would like to think that Lavoy, the patriot that he was, set a few brush fires of freedom and liberty in the hearts and minds of many across this country, that his sacrifice, his stand for freedom, for liberty, for agency was not in vain. And thank you. God bless you guys. God bless your efforts. God bless your strength. It's going to take all of us if we're going to save this Constitution in this country. And thank you for having me.